Why does love, something we associate with joy, fulfillment, and connection, so often begin with suffering? Why must the heart break before it can truly love? At first glance, these questions seem irrational. In ordinary reasoning, pain and love belong to opposite domains. Yet, in the view of Shams Tabrizi, the 13th century mystic and teacher of Rumi, suffering is not the enemy of love, it is its purification. Love dismantles the illusions of control, pride, and separation that protect the ego. That dismantling is painful, but necessary. Shams taught that love without suffering is only attachment, a comfort that flatters the self rather than transforms it. Genuine love begins when the self's defenses start to dissolve, when what we call pain becomes the friction that refines perception. Modern psychology observes a similar process. Studies on post-traumatic growth show that individuals who experience emotional pain often report increased empathy, clarity of purpose, and spiritual awareness afterward. Suffering, when integrated consciously, can become a catalyst for transformation rather than a mere source of distress. Modern culture, however, has a deeply ambivalent relationship with pain. We idealize comfort, pathologize discomfort, and define success as the elimination of hardship. Entire industries revolve around numbing emotional unease through entertainment, consumerism, medication, and distraction. Psychologically, this avoidance has a cost. The brain's hedonic adaptation ensures that pleasure quickly returns to baseline, creating a cycle of craving and dissatisfaction. The more we avoid discomfort, the less capable we become of emotional resilience and distress tolerance too, essential components of psychological strength. From a neuroscientific standpoint, avoidance amplifies suffering. When pain is resisted, the amygdala, the brain's threat center, becomes hyperactive. Chronic avoidance reinforces fear circuits, while acceptance activates prefrontal regions that reinterpret the experience. Resistance multiplies pain. Conscious acceptance transforms it. The person who avoids heartbreak often avoids depth. The one who fears failure often avoids growth. In both cases, comfort protects the ego at the expense of evolution. Shams saw suffering not as a sign of something gone wrong, but as the furnace through which the raw metal of the heart becomes gold. The problem, he would say, is not that we suffer, but that we suffer unconsciously. Shams Tabrizi, the spiritual mentor of Jalaluddin Rumi, viewed pain as the initiation rite into authentic love. He wrote, "Suffering is a gift. In it is hidden mercy." In his philosophy, pain is not punishment, but the disintegration of illusion, the breakdown of the ego's false autonomy. Real love and pain are inseparable because genuine love dismantles the illusion of control and exposes vulnerability. Carl Jung echoed this truth. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. Contemporary neuroscience supports this observation. During periods of emotional distress, the brain undergoes neuroplastic rewiring, reorganizing its circuits to accommodate new emotional realities. Growth, in both neural and spiritual terms, requires friction. According to Shams, the ego resists surrender. It constructs an identity built on control, comparison, and certainty. When these structures collapse, pain arises not because something has gone wrong, but because illusion is being removed. The wine of love cannot be poured into a vessel already full of self. Pain is the process of emptying. This mirrors what modern neuroscience calls ego dissolution, a phenomenon observed in mindfulness and psychedelic studies. When activity in the default mode network decreases, individuals report feelings of unity, compassion, and intercede nets. Heartbreak often feels like annihilation because it threatens one's self-image, who I am in relation to another. Yet through that collapse, one may discover a deeper form of love, no longer rooted in ownership or validation. Pain strips away self-importance and prepares the heart for genuine connection. Shams wrote, "The wound is the place where light enters you. Pain forces introspection. When comfort is removed, attention turns inward. Emotional pain activates the anterior cingulate cortex, a region involved in emotional regulation and self-reflection. This leads to metacognition of one's own mental states, a cornerstone of emotional intelligence. Individuals who undergo loss or trauma frequently report enhanced compassion and gratitude afterward. Psychologists call this post-adversity growth. For Shams, this marks the awakening of the eye of the heart. Suffering expands consciousness beyond comfort's narrow perimeter. Shams compared love to fire, not destructive, but refining. Fire refines gold. Love refines the soul. Pain acts as a catalyst that converts raw grief, jealousy into compassion, forgiveness, and empathy. Neuroscience explains this through prefrontal limbic integration, the coordination between emotional and rational centers. When emotions are processed mindfully, coherence replaces chaos. After betrayal, for example, rage can evolve into understanding when examined consciously. The pain remains as memory, but is transformed in meaning. For Shams, suffering refines the emotional system. It teaches love not as sentiment, but as an evolved capacity for conscious, regulated feeling. In the final stage, the goal is not escape from suffering, but absorption into it, realizing that the pain of longing is love itself. The seeker suffers only because they perceive separation between themselves and the beloved. When awareness unites with its source, the sense of distance dissolves, and suffering ends. In mystical terms, this is union. In psychological terms, integration. Neuroscientific parallels appear in studies of self-transcendent states such as deep meditation or flow. Boundaries of self dissolve, creating experiences of bliss and unity. Artists, scientists, and lovers alike report that their greatest suffering and highest joy often coexist. Pain stretches the psyche's boundaries until they dissolve, revealing that love and pain are not two forces but two aspects of one continuum, the human capacity for presence. Pain and love are not opposites, but sequential stages in the same unfolding process. Pain exposes attachment. Love transforms that attachment into unity. Pain equals perception of division, while love equals realization of unity. The transitional phase between these, when division dissolves, but unity is not yet realized, what we experience as suffering. Thinkers like Viktor Frankl and Kierkegaard taught that meaning is found not in avoiding suffering, but in confronting it consciously. Frankl observed that those who could frame their pain within purpose displayed greater resilience. Cognitively, when pain is met with awareness, the brain reclassifies it from threat to information. In essence, the heart must break not to weaken, but to expand. From personal attachment to universal compassion, how can Shams' teaching be applied today? Acceptance is not resignation, but mindful engagement with discomfort. Observing pain without resistance activates prefrontal regulation, reducing emotional volatility, meaning-making reframes chaos into structure. Asking what is this pain teaching allows insight to emerge. Compassion training activates oxytocin pathways, softening defensive responses and improving emotional regulation, a transpersonal perspective through prayer. Meditation or service connects the self with something larger, reducing rumination and enhancing equanimity. In all these practices, the transformation Shams described becomes observable. Pain, when consciously processed, evolves the emotional architecture of the brain, converting suffering into depth and love into awareness. Pain is not divine cruelty, but divine calibration, a rebalancing that brings the self into alignment with reality. To taste the wine of love, one must first endure the burning that cleanses the vessel. Psychologically, pain dismantles rigidity. Neurologically, it rewires empathy. Spiritually, it dissolves separation. Shams did not glorify suffering for its own sake. He pointed to conscious suffering pain, illuminated by understanding. Only then does the heart become large enough to contain both joy and sorrow without collapse. Pain is the curriculum. Love is the degree. The heart that learns through suffering is not broken, it is educated. As Shams might remind us, he who refuses to suffer cannot love, for love itself is the wound through which the infinite enters.